The world's first postage stamp was introduced in England in 1840 as part of a major reform of the postal system. Until then, the letter recipient had to pay the postage. This first stamp was called the penny black because it cost 1 penny and featured Queen Victoria's profile on a black background. Today's postage stamps feature all types of illustrations. A graphic artist produces a design concept, working the computer cursor like a paintbrush on canvas. This concept goes to the Postal Service's Design Authority for approval. Once approved, the design goes to the printing company. The printer produces one type of stamp using 2 different types of printing presses, one of which requires an engraved printing plate. The company's master engraver draws his artistic interpretation of the concept using photographs of real subjects for inspiration. Then he paints his drawing in watercolors. The shading is key because it indicates where the engraving will have depth. This helps him envision the end product. Once he's happy with the result, he scans the image into a computer and shrinks the digitized image to the actual stamp size. Then he lays a sheet of clear acetate over the reduction. With a tool called a point, he etches the main elements into the sheet. This etching process is known as scribing. Now he tapes the scribed sheet onto a piece of soft steel. He lifts the sheet and coats the metal surface with beeswax. Then he lays the sheet down again and, rubbing with a burnishing tool, transfers the scribed image to the wax coating. Now, under a microscope that magnifies the image 7 times, he etches the design using what's called a pointing in tool. Then he sharpens another tool called a lozenge graver. With that, he deepens the etched lines of the design's focal point. This adds depth, which will make the deer appear almost 3-dimensional on the finished stamp. Once complete, the engraving will be copied multiple times onto a plastic master plate. Workers coat the plastic with silver so that it will conduct electricity, then submerge it in a bath containing baskets of nickel. They run an electric current through both the bath and plate. This dissolves the nickel and draws it onto the plate in a thorough and even coat. With a nipping tool, workers remove the excess nickel along the perimeter, then extract their nickel printing plate. Then they plate the nickel plate in chrome. Now it's ready to go onto the intaglio printing press, a specialized machine used to print only select elements on certain types of stamps. We'll explain why later. This machine, meanwhile, produces the templates for carving what are called shablons, the rollers on the intaglio press that transfer ink to the printing plates. Here, the machine traces a pattern for one of the stamp's intaglio elements, guiding a router on the other end to reproduce it in half the size in thick plastic. At another machine, meanwhile, a worker makes the shablons. He takes several ingredients, what they are is a closely guarded company secret, and pours them into a roller forming machine. The mix heats to about 180 degrees Celsius, and over about an hour and a half, it thickens and hardens. Now, an automated router machine with multiple heads goes to work. Following the plastic template, the heads carve away at the rubber, leaving behind a raised design in the shape of the elements the intaglio press will print. It's this raised area that transfers the ink to the printing plate. Why do they print some parts of a stamp using one type of press and other parts of it using another type? Simple. Offset printing presses are widely available, so if the entire stamp would be printed using that technology, counterfeiters would have it easy. Intaglio printing presses, on the other hand, are harder to come by, making fake stamps harder to produce. The sheets first run through the offset press. It prints one color at a time, inking a separate printing plate for each color. The plate is wrapped around a cylinder. As it revolves, the plate transfers, or offsets, the ink image to a rubber cylinder rotating against it. As that cylinder turns, it transfers the image to the paper passing underneath. A Postal Service official inspects the press output. Using a magnifying glass, she scrutinizes the color and print quality, circling any problem areas for the press operator to investigate and correct. Now the offset printed sheets move on to the intaglio press. The intaglio's Shablon rollers spread ink over the printing plate the factory produced from the engraving. The ink fills the recessed lines of the image. The press runs the plate against the paper sheets, transferring the image. Intaglio printing leaves the ink slightly raised above the surface of the paper. This gives the image height, a third dimension. Once again, the inspector checks the result. It's up to the press operator to correct any error. The cause can be as complicated as a printing plate problem or as simple as a speck of dirt in the machine. The printing now done, a worker loads the stamp sheets into a computer-guided perforating machine. Grippers pull the sheets forward one section at a time. Down comes a die with rows of steel pins, each just a millimeter in diameter. They punch through the sheet, framing each stamp with tiny holes spaced precisely 1.5 millimeters apart. The machine knows just where to punch these perforations by reading the line of fluorescent ink that runs along the borders of each stamp. This ink, called tagging, is visible only under ultraviolet light. Tagging also plays a role later on. The automated machines that process mail at the sorting plants are programmed to scan for tagging. They reject all envelopes without it. Those letters are either missing a stamp or bear counterfeit postage. After stacking the perforated sheets, workers trim them down to the finished size, usually sheets of 10 called panes. The trimming machine is appropriately called the guillotine, but unlike the head-chopping version, this one slices with a sideways shearing action. That puts less wear on the blade. The machine holds the stack in place with 4,000 kilograms of pressure so that it doesn't budge under the weight of the blade, which rings in at almost 32 kilos. Now it's time to group the panes into manageable sized packs for post offices and other stamp retailers. This machine is called a vacuumatic counter because it uses suction to draw the panes across a paddle wheel which counts them. This stack adds up to 503 panes, so the worker removes 3 to make an even 500. The counter inserts a tab between every 50. Some stamps go through what's called bursting, the process of manually separating pairs of stamps for different post office product lines, such as gift sets. Some burst stamps go onto first day cover envelopes, one popular collector's item. An automated pad picks up the stamps and runs them against a wet roller that activates the adhesive on the back. After a worker positions an envelope against a guide bar, the pad places the stamps in a precise spot and applies even pressure over them so that they'll lay flat and adhere securely. Most stamps are still the old lick and stick type, printed on paper that's coated with a moisture-activated adhesive on the backside. However, the most commonly issued stamps, known as definitives, are printed on what's called pressure-sensitive paper. That's the technical term for peel and stick. No water or saliva required.